Some horror stories begin with screams. Others begin with something quieter, a feeling, the sense that something isn't right, long before you understand why. The stories you're about to hear aren't about monsters. They're about moments, small details, tiny things that feel wrong from the beginning. And by the time the people in these stories realized what was happening, it was already too late. Story 1. The Woman in Apartment 14. I moved into the apartment 3 months after my breakup. I wasn't doing great financially, or mentally, honestly. So when I found a cheap unit in an older building on the edge of town, I took it immediately. The place smelled faintly like dust and radiator heat. The carpets were uneven, the hallways buzzed with fluorescent lights that flickered every few seconds. But it was quiet. At least, it was during the day. The first night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of something dragging across the floor above me. Not footsteps, furniture, slow, heavy, like someone was moving a couch 1 inch at a time. It lasted maybe 20 minutes, then stopped. I remember staring at the ceiling, thinking, who rearranges furniture at 2 in the morning? The next night, it happened again. Same time, same scraping noise. By the 4th night, I finally mentioned it to the property manager. Hey, whoever's above me keeps moving stuff around every night. She looked confused, then said, above you? I nodded. Apartment 14. She stared at me for a second too long, then laughed. Nobody lives in 14. I laughed too, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. After that conversation, the sounds got worse. Not louder, worse. Sometimes it sounded like something being dragged rapidly across the floor. Sometimes it sounded like pacing. And once, I heard what sounded like crying. I started sleeping with headphones on, but every night around 2:13, I'd wake up anyway. About 2 weeks later, I came home late from work during a rainstorm. I parked across the street from the building, and that's when I saw her. A woman standing in the upstairs window, completely still, pale face, dark hair, one hand against the glass, watching the parking lot, watching me. I remember feeling relieved because finally proof someone lived up there. I actually waved awkwardly. She didn't move. The hallway upstairs smelled strange that night, damp, metallic. I walked to apartment 14 and stopped. The door wasn't there. There was no apartment 14, just blank wall paneling. The next morning, I checked the building directory. It skipped from 12 to 16. I asked another tenant about it, older guy named Frank. He got visibly uncomfortable when I mentioned it. Don't knock up there. Why? Just don't. Eventually, I bought a cheap security camera for my apartment, mostly to prove to myself I wasn't losing it. The next morning, I checked the footage from 2:13 a.m. The audio captured the dragging sound perfectly, but the video glitched every few seconds, missing chunks of time. And during one of those missing sections, my bedroom door opened slightly, even though I lived alone. A week later, Frank finally told me the truth. Years earlier, a woman in apartment 14 called the police repeatedly, claiming her husband was trying to kill her. Nobody believed her. One night, neighbors heard furniture dragging upstairs for hours. Nobody checked. The husband had been pushing dressers and tables against the bedroom door while she hid inside. By morning, both of them were dead. After the murders, management sealed the apartment permanently, covered the door, renumbered the hallway, pretended it never existed. I moved out 2 days later. But before I left, I stood across the street one last time, looking up at the building. And there she was again, in the upstairs window, one hand pressed against the glass, watching me leave. Story 2. Something kept appearing beside the highway. In 2021, I worked overnight medical deliveries between rural hospitals, mostly blood supplies, medication, occasionally organs for transport teams. It paid well, but the drives were brutal. Long stretches of empty highway, rain, no radio stations, nothing but road for hours. The first time I saw him, I thought he needed help. He was standing beside the highway around 3 a.m., hands in pockets, facing the road. No car nearby, no lights, just standing there. I slowed down slightly, but something about him felt wrong. He wasn't looking at passing cars, he was looking directly at me. 3 nights later, I saw him again. Different county, same face, different jacket, same expression, completely motionless. After that, I started noticing him everywhere, beside exits, near tree lines, standing near abandoned gas stations, always alone. Then, things got worse. One night, I stopped for coffee around 4 a.m., locked the truck, went inside for maybe 3 minutes. When I came back, there were muddy footprints inside the vehicle, on the passenger side floor, leading nowhere. Around that time, I started losing small chunks of memory. Nothing dramatic, just strange gaps. I'd suddenly realize 20 minutes had passed, or I'd miss entire stretches of highway without remembering driving them. I assumed it was exhaustion, until dispatch called me one morning asking why I stopped for 11 minutes on an abandoned service road. I told them I hadn't. They sent me the GPS log. Exact same location. 4 separate nights. I requested footage from the truck depot. I wish I hadn't. The video showed my truck parked beside the trees at 3:11 a.m. My door opened. I stepped out slowly, then stood there, like I was listening to someone, but nobody else was visible. After about 10 seconds, I nodded, like someone had finished speaking. I quit 2 weeks later. Haven't driven overnight since. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm stopped at red lights, I still check the edge of the road, just in case he's standing there again, waiting for me to pull over. Story 3. The hospice patient wouldn't let me close the door. I've worked hospice care for almost 8 years. Most people think the hardest part is death. It isn't. The hardest part is when patients become afraid, especially when they can't explain why. Her name was Margaret, late 70s, terminal cancer. Sweet woman, very quiet. During my first overnight shift with her, she grabbed my wrist as I adjusted her blankets. "Please don't close the door all the way." I smiled gently. "Okay." She looked past me toward the hallway, then whispered, "He hates when it shuts." I assumed dementia or medication confusion. Hospice patients say unsettling things sometimes. You learn not to react. But strange things started happening almost immediately. Motion alarms activating in empty rooms, call buttons ringing with no patients inside, doors slowly opening on their own. Every time it happened, Margaret would look terrified. One night she asked me, "Did he come back tonight?" I asked who. She just stared at the doorway. Her daughter visited twice during my shifts, very polite, very tense. One evening, I casually mentioned Margaret's fear of him. The daughter's face changed instantly. "What exactly has she been saying?" I explained the comments about the door. She went pale, then quietly asked, "Has she described him?" Apparently, Margaret's husband disappeared decades earlier after becoming increasingly violent. He abandoned the family completely. Nobody had seen him since the 1980s. Margaret had dementia episodes involving him before. The daughter believed she was reliving old trauma. Honestly, so did I. Until the night of the storm. Around 2 a.m., the power flickered during heavy rain. Half the hallway lights went out. I was checking rooms when Margaret suddenly started screaming. Real screaming, terrified. I ran inside. She was pointing at the doorway. "Don't let him close it." Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, uneven, heavy. I assumed another nurse was approaching, but when I stepped outside, the hallway was empty, except for one thing. Wet footprints, large, muddy, leading toward Margaret's room. Police searched the facility grounds before sunrise. They found signs someone had been sleeping inside an abandoned maintenance shed behind the hospice center. Old blankets, food wrappers, cigarettes, and photographs of Margaret. Recent photographs. Nobody ever identified who'd been staying there. Margaret died 3 days later, but right before she passed, she grabbed my hand one last time. He finally left. Sometimes I still think about those muddy footprints and the fact that they only led one direction, toward her room, never away from it. Fear doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it starts as a feeling, a tiny realization that something isn't right. And once that feeling appears, it never fully leaves.